Hey, thank you.
I'm recording this too, so everybody knows. So Danny, you can look at this later.
Pleasure to meet you, Dan.
Let me give you screen sharing rights. How about that, Aaron? Do you have it?
Still says host disabled.
Host disabled. All right.
I got it. I got it, Aaron.
Mine still says host as disabled participants.
I'm Tom, I think. Am I looking at your Gmail?
Yes.
Or is this yours, Aaron? This is yours, Tom?
That's me. Yeah, hang on.
Okay, so you're sharing your own.
I don't know how to release this.
I can verbally talk about it.
I got it. There we go.
There we go.
Awesome.
I'm just slow, Aaron, that's all.
No, you're just fine. By way of a head nod, can you see that?
Yes.
So if I talk about 3 rules of fundraising, we use a gift chart like this in conversations and development with even donor prospects, but this is what I use. And don't mind this, I just pulled another fraternity campaigns at the $500,000 level. I knew that was kind of the number that we talked about. The first rule is the understanding of who's going to make a gift. You know, this chapter, I just plugged in 1,000 alumni here. Typically, we recommend no more than 10% be lost. And so we always have a collection of lost alumni. But the first rule is that 20 to 25% of your alumni are likely to make a gift. So 1 in 4 alumni. I think the common misconception is that, you know, we'll go out and ask all 1,000 alumni to stroke a $1,000 check and we're at $1 million. Well, that doesn't work in any experience of ours. The most prolific alumni participation that we've ever seen is about 56%. So getting comfortable with the fact that 1 in 4 alumni, you're going to hear no's. And so the more comfortable you get with that, the more successful you will be in fundraising, because your volunteers, when they hear a no, they'll just slide that into, you know, I can focus more time on the next yes. Oftentimes volunteers get beat up over hearing no. And so
I'm a sales guy, Aaron. So
right.
I'm used to that word.
Yeah. And so I just encourage groups, get comfortable with the 20%. The second rule is how we start to tier out gift sizes. About 80% of the dollars are going to come from about 20% of those who participate. So we've got a very slim population of alumni who are going to make up the vast majority of the dollars raised. That's how we start to tier out gift sizes. But then these leadership level donors, we generally find that about 10 donors help us realize 50 to 60% of any total. 500,000, $1 million, $15 million. It's 10 alumni. And so after the feasibility study, our feasibility study is really to test and garner feedback from alumni on that goal. You know, typically we show them this gift chart. We ask them if other alumni would participate, where they might see themselves. And then we adjust the campaign goal relative to that feedback. I think you've got a great, you know, with Phil's involvement, how we would normally go out in a capital campaign is about 10 to 12 months of a quiet phase fundraising effort. And our goal during that 10 to 12 months would be to personally see and solicit the top 75 to 100 donors.
Yeah.
Because if you're seeing and soliciting the top 75, you're going to see and solicit these top 10. And then you're going to be 2/3 to 3/4 of the way to goal when you publicly announce the capital campaign. And so I would offer you those 3 rules. 20 to 25% of alumni are going to participate, 80% of the dollars from 20% of those who participate, and about 10 donors are going to help you realize 50 to 60% of your success. From a process perspective, I would tell you, do not publicly announce a capital campaign via social media communication until you've got 2/3 to 3/4 of the dollars raised. I think I shared this swimming analogy with Tom. Generally, I've got a 9-month-old, and so I like to think about my childhood. I remember the first swim of the season, Memorial Day every year. The water's cold, everybody's nervous to get in, so there's a lot of excitement to be at the pool, but not in the pool, until one person goes off the high dive, does a cannonball, says the water's nice, and then everybody gets in. And that's the same way with the campaign. We want to see these 169 are going to be more likely to jump in and write a check if you've got the perceived leaders on board with a significant commitment to the capital campaign.
So, Aaron, these, and Tom, I mean, you're more into the dollars and cents of this because you've been doing this for so much longer than me, but those 10 donors that we'll be seeking, some people fly under the radar pretty well. I mean, as far as their accomplishments, as their success, where they stand. Is there a certain secret out there of finding who those 10% are? The people that we really should be targeting before we publicize this?
So it's a little bit of an art, a little bit of a science, Tim. I think how we do it is a mixture of some wealth research and then talking with brothers about their brothers. I think there are many groups that think, well, Pennington's got a magic button that they just push and it spits out a suggested ask based upon their net worth and assets, right?
Sure.
But we do run some of that wealth research, but it's only publicly available knowledge. And a lot of times very successful people hide their wealth very keenly.
Yeah.
And so we run that information and look for people who on paper look like they've accumulated some wealth. But the best information is the brother-to-brother knowledge, the golf course conversations, the over a beer at the bar conversations, the Tom's group of 12 guys that vacation together and late night. I sold a business for, $3 million. Those are the conversations that you get more of the how successful have you been? And just to offer you a little confidence when I talk with groups about donor prospects, I like to hold what I think they might be capable of and say, where on this gift chart do you feel Tom might be? And I like to, we usually spread these gifts out over a 5-year period.
Yeah, we're going to do this.
So, asking a brother that knows the brother, and brother-to-brother solicitation is the most valuable, most meaningful, most successful solicitation. We just presented some data at this conference. Our gift size goes up nearly 2-fold when we have a volunteer and Pennington and Company person in the room. But normally I'll ask a brother, where do you think Tim might be on this gift chart? And they say, well, I think he could probably do 3 to 5 a year. Okay. Well, we're going to walk in and ask Tim for $25,000 then. I've never been criticized for asking too high. It's almost flattering, right? You're complimenting the success. If somebody walked into my house and asked me for 50 grand, I might chuckle a little bit and I'd probably say, that's great. I'm glad I'm perceived that way, but I just don't have that financial capability. And so I would just, as you create your prospect list, you can kind of go through your eras and say, who's been successful in your eras? There's usually 1 to 2 guys every couple years that have been outlandishly successful. Make up your prospect list and then walk through the prospect list and identify where do you think this brother might be capable and ask at the capability level. Because what you're going to see through the campaign is where is the willingness relative to the capability. If you ask at the capability level, you're going to start to stretch that willingness up to the capability if you've got a great case for support, which you do. And so I would just literally kind of go page by page through the directory and pull out those brothers that have been successful, and that's your prospect list. And then
Very
work
good.
with your team to identify that suggested ask.
And
And
we
business
have all
secrets.
that information. We have all that information, and I think we can do that pretty effectively. I mean, you know, Timmy, it's like Harry and Nancy Ricker, Steve Salmon. I mean, I don't know how far up they go, but I mean, these are people that are our age that, you know, one owns a vineyard out in Napa. You know, the other's the biggest apple farmer in Maine.
Well, and that's why I show this at the $500,000 level. And I think this answers your previous question, Tom. We've got the 3-step process.
Yeah.
I would go out with nothing less than the $575,000 campaign and ask relative to that. It's always easier to reduce your goal than it is to up your goal. And, you know, if I were to show you a $250,000 gift chart, the lead gift typically is 15 to 17% of goal. And so your lead gift might be, you know, 15 or 25,000. Well, if you've got an alumnus capable of 75 grand, just by showing them a gift chart or making an ask at 25, you cut off $50,000 worth of support. So if you started at, that's the beauty of quiet phase fundraising as well. Before you announce, if you start to fundraise at 575,000, those are the needs of the fraternity that make the fraternity the best chapter into the future. You said it yourself, Tom. We certainly $250,000 is our ticket to ride, but to be the chapter we want to be, it's 575. And so start selling, because your most successful alumni at the top end of this leadership, they're going to be visionary alumni. They want to know, they want to be problem solvers. They want to know what is most sustainable and sets Sigma Chi at Maine to be the best fraternity on campus.
Yeah.
And so that answers, ask based on
that's just one of our big questions. You know, what do we go out for? Again, the concern, I guess my concern was, we got to get over the 250 hurdle by the end of the year, or we need to show significant progress, and they'll extend the purchase option. So, you know, but okay.
And we always work inside out, top down. And so the first encouragement that I had is don't announce a capital campaign until you've seen your major donor prospects and are 2/3 to 3/4 of the way to goal. That also allows you to adjust that goal. You know, if you go out at 575,000 and start having the conversation and alumni aren't responding well, you know, not making the gift at the capability level or close to, you can pull off that, and then you can announce the $250,000 campaign. But the second piece is soliciting inside out, top down. So inside out is the guys that you have involved. You should have, we always recommend 100% participation by the guys making the decision to move forward. You know, I worked on one campaign, we were going to solicit $100,000 from a 2004 grad. Ridiculous money from a very young guy. We went through the pitch and he said, do you have 100% participation? The people that voted to move forward on this. We couldn't say yes. He said, don't come talk to me about money until you have 100% participation from the people that made the decision to move forward. Keen, like that illustrated why he's been successful. And so we encourage the people being involved, make your financial commitment and make a meaningful stretch commitment, because that will inspire others to do the same. Top down then is start at the top of this gift chart, start soliciting your major donor prospects first. So inside out, top down would be the second piece of advice that I'd have. And then the third would be set checkpoints along the way to evaluate how you're progressing to that goal, to know if you have to come off of that 575. So, but if you're starting to ask, you know, if you get 2 guys in at 50,000, and you're making good progress.
Yeah.
If you're making these asks and they say, well, I can give you 5,000, then we might need to adjust that goal. But I would start at 575.
You're answering a couple of our big questions. One is what's our target, and that's answered 575. But the other one is, you know, when do you kick off the active campaign? You know, Danny's ready to do it on Monday. I'm not. I'm not. And
doesn't
again,
sound
what you're
like
doing
that's
with the
easy.
capital campaign is, and the other guy that's done a ton of work is Sean Kimball in, list cleanup. I mean, I've worked with him for hours, so I can only imagine what he's doing. But, we're going after all these alumni, but they're the guys that are down here, not the guys that are up here. So that's important, but that's phase 2, phase 3, after going after the whales.
So yeah, go whale hunting first. Again, our average campaign is 14 to 16 months, and we spend 12 to 14 months in quiet phase fundraising.
Yeah.
I think the biggest perception is when we're ready to start this, we need to go shout it out from the rooftops. But as I said before, you're going to be more successful with your lower dollar donors if you have your perceived leaders on the contributors list.
Oh yeah.
Everybody loves the thermometer. They love, actually, let me show you. This is that campaign that I talked about at Tennessee Tech. When I say everybody loves that thermometer, this little thermometer here,
Oh yeah.
it's easy. It's easier to make a gift when it's right here than trying to be the first dollar in the door. But then you scroll down and you look at some of these donations at 15,000, 5,000. People will look at what others have contributed. And if I'm in Paul Bradley's class and he made a $10,000 gift, I have probably a vague awareness of Paul Bradley's success and capability. And if Paul Bradley made $1,000 gift, I'd be like, well, why did he sandbag on this? But if you see some of these gifts and you're like, oh, that kind of matches Paul's wherewithal, I'll step up and join him. And what you'll find in fraternity fundraising is it gets very competitive. Paul Bradley's or Tom, you and Danny, you might say, well, I'm going to beat Danny by $1. And so whatever he gives, I'm going to give $1 more.
Yeah.
And you'll see some of that. But people will look at this list and identify their peers. And so if you publicly announce the campaign, you're doing two things. One, you're trying to get people to make the first gift, and that's harder to do. And two, they can't identify who their perceived leaders are. Like in my fraternity, if John Laughlin's not on the list, I'm going to ask why John isn't on the list. Like, does he not believe in this?
What about people that want to remain anonymous? There's some people that want their name at the top of the list for everybody to see. And there's some people that are going to say, yeah, I really don't want my name in there. So you just list them as anonymous in their class?
So there are no anonymous donors on this contributors list. We, in the quiet phase of the capital campaign, we have that. If a donor wants to remain anonymous, we always entertain that, but we also explain the benefit of why it's good not to remain anonymous.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Because others will look up to you, and that will help our success if we can list your name.
You're bringing more.
I've only had on a rare couple of occurrences that individuals are adamant, and sometimes they're in public positions or whatnot that they don't want their name out there in that capacity. But sometimes I've had one donor that he was making a significantly large gift. Again, a guy that hides his wealth well, lives modestly, and so he made $100,000 commitment and did 150 anonymously for a $250 total combined gift. So he hid part of his gift, but still recognized his name out there. So I would encourage anybody to consider including your name because it will help the success of the campaign.
That makes sense. Then they feel like they're doing double duty. I was trying to be valiant or righteous.
Yep.
But if you want me to be public, okay.
So I mean, if things are going very well before the end of the year, you get your 10 people on board at the top of the gift chart and you feel confident about 575, maybe by the end of the year. But I would certainly, even that would be aggressive.
Yeah.
I would say if you started September 1, starting with quiet phase, and then I would set some goals. How many people do we need to see a month to hit 75 by June of next year? And then you can pace progress to that goal, because if you set a goal for 75 solicitations and you prioritize your prospect list inside out, top down, that sets up your checkpoints to evaluate how you're doing to goal.
Oh. Yep. I do want to talk to you maybe separately about the alumni management and communication, or alumni
Yep.
communication and management. Like I say, I think it's something that we need to look at for Maine as well as Rhode Island. You know, everyone has good intentions and it just fucking doesn't get done.
Yep. Again, why we're in business, right?
Right. Yeah.
That second reason, the science and experience first, but we work with volunteers and we add some consistency.
Yeah.
To ensure that.
And then I guess the other piece, I don't know that it makes sense to engage you guys. I mean, we're in a short time frame, but from a consulting basis, I mean, what are we talking about, Aaron? I mean, what are the options?
For like to engage Pennington to help on the capital raise?
Hey, we got these issues right now. You know, we talk whatever frequency, weekly. Well, it's pretty short, every 2 weeks or something. These are the issues we run into. You know, what do you think? How would you approach this?
So I hate to answer the question with a question, Tom. I think it would depend on the scope of work and what you're looking for. So you have to draft out what that looks like. Typically for groups that engage in a consulting agreement, it's we need volunteer management. So we need Pennington to host the monthly meeting, work with 6 to 8 volunteers and hold them accountable to phone calls and solicitations. Sometimes that includes, we'd like Pennington to be involved in, 15 to 25 solicitations. And so we price it based upon the scope of work and the amount of time we think that scope of work is going to take.
Yeah.
And then what consultant we have available as a fit to work that project.
All right. Well, I guess maybe that's something that we can talk separately or offline. I mean, today's a perfect example. You know, Danny's ready to kick off the active campaign, next week, and have an expert come in and say, you're shooting yourself in your foot if you do that. It is invaluable to us. We've got the worker bees. It's just making sure that worker bees, that we're all doing the right stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the stuff that I saw in the materials is more public phase. I would be head down on how many solicitations do we want to do and ensure that those are your whales. Go whale hunting first.
Yeah.
The pavers, the sponsor a brother program, some of those items are more public phase solicitation tactics, because here's what you don't want. You don't want to push something out and somebody says, I love the sponsor a brother program, but the sponsor a brother program is how much, and they sponsor a brother and don't make the $5,000 commitment you want them.
Yeah, it's irrelevant to what we're working on. Yeah,
that's the way to get last dollars in the door, not the bulk of your dollars.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I recorded this because now Danny can see you saying that.
Hey, and I don't blame Danny.
No,
there's a lot of excitement when you start a campaign, and my advice to that is, time for you is going to go extremely glacial pace. Like you're excited, you've got this case for support, you want to start getting it out there now. Time for your alumni who haven't been engaged is still going to go like the blink of an eye. And so if you spend 6 or 8 months in quiet pace fundraising, for you, that's going to go slowly. For an alumnus who hasn't heard the word, I mean, that time hasn't even happened, right? But when they do get the announcement, then they say, holy smokes, they've raised $300,000 on $575,000. Oh, they've got Tom, Tim, Danny, Phil, all on board. Well, this is a slam dunk. I'll just write my check. So that time for people not involved, the bulk population of your alumni is life's going to continue to move at the same speed it always does.
Okay. And then, we've talked about having team captains or decade captains, or, people who are championing and then finding the brother that's the closest to the guy, let's say it's the 60s. he gets the guy that's closest to the guy in 65 who knew him. But we need to train these people so that we're being consistent in how we approach and what our approach is. I mean, do you guys do any kind of team captain training or?
Since 2020, these are fresh stats off that conference. We had one of our teammates present. We've recruited 3,000 volunteers since 2020. It's about 73 a month. And so we do that through the quiet phase, the solicitation process. You know, we might make a dual ask. Tom, would you consider a gift of X and be an era leader or class leader for your era? And then we develop some materials and, you know, call script, email script. But those era and class leaders are, again, a public phase effort. We're doing major gift solicitation and recruiting those through the quiet phase.
Yeah.
And that builds you a runway to have the full team. And then once you announce those era and class leaders, it's more of a soft sell, you know, accountability push to say, hey, we need more men from our class on this contributors list. And so that's involved with the public phase effort.
I mean, one of the things I'm thinking about is we've got a guy by the name of Pat Marino. He's a late 60s guy, attorney, former banker. He was, this is our second go around in trying to acquire the house. The university vacated it back in 15. We had the opportunity to buy it for 510. You know, we didn't have a capital campaign going. They wanted us in there by September. We didn't have, tried to do a lease to buy. Anyway, we failed, but this is where we brought in the capital campaign guy to do the feasibility study. We got less than halfway through, and then it was clear that it was going away for 5 years, you know, because once the university reoccupied the building, you know, the dean of student affairs who I was working with said, you're never going to get them out of there. And I mean, that's basically what happened until our guy Phil came along with you know, $10 million donation.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've got this guy, Pat Marino. He was one of the original $1,000 seed money donors back in that 15-16 period. Danny had a conversation. I talked to him fairly often, but Danny had a conversation more in depth with him. There's actually a meeting tonight. There's a guy who holds a 60s group monthly Sigma Chi, you know, get together. So Danny's actually going there tonight with Andy Sawyer, our house court treasurer, and Pat's going to be there. He had a phone call with Pat earlier, and Pat's saying, I can raise 100 grand within my crew. I'll raise 100 grand, you know. But when I talked to him some months ago, he's like, I'll do 50K. I'll get Bob Flynn to do 50K, and I can do, you know, 10 a year, 5-5-5 or 10-10-10. In his case, the problem is he's got it in a foundation that he can transfer funds, but it has to go to a 501c3. Then 501c3 is an issue. I mean, we're looking at, you know, the Sigma Chi Foundation that'll do it for percentage of square footage or percentage of ed space.
Yep.
But you know, they're only getting to 30%. I've talked to some. There's Steve Knight he was a past House Corps president at University of Cincinnati, who's formed their own. Tony Flores out in Sacramento formed their own. And the advantage is that, you know, they do the 1023, you know, application to the IRS, and they maximize the educational square footage. And I don't know what percentage they got up to, but I think it was, you know, 50 or 60%, which is not ideal, but it's at least acceptable, I think.
So we've been on Capitol Hill fighting this for many years. We thought we had it passed in the 2018 tax bill that fraternity houses are seen as equal to that of any university housing on campus, but we're not quite there yet. So it's an issue we run into with every capital campaign of ours. It's usually a percentage. I think the average that we work on is about 40%. Obviously, new construction tends to be higher because you can design in the educational square footage. But generally, what we do is a threshold of giving, where we look at, okay, what's 30%? And then we offer that tax deductibility to donors at a certain level or above, because those are going to be more likely your donors who are itemizing their tax returns.
Say that again. Say that again, Aaron.
So I'll pull up this gift chart again.
Yeah.
So, you know, in that Pike campaign that I just showed you, we've raised just over $1 million. Only 2 gifts are tax deductible right now. It's $100,000 gift and a $50,000 gift. And they have about 45% educational space. What we suggested is that gifts in that campaign, we started at $2 million. We suggested that gifts at $50,000 and above were tax deductible. You know, if you had 30%, you could say gifts maybe of 25, probably more like the $50,000 and above. I don't know if Phil's going to take tax deductibility.
No, he's not. I mean, that was one of the questions when we first started going through this. He wanted to see if he could gift it to the Sigma Chi Foundation, which is a 501c3, and then they could, you know, gift it to the House Corps. But the House Corps is going to be a 501c7, and they can't do that. And Phil's not comfortable, and I'm not comfortable with them giving the property to the fraternity.
So that's what commonly happens, Tom. In a solicitation, we talk about this tax deductibility issue.
Yeah.
And most commonly, it's challenging because for so long in fundraising, when you make a gift, you expect the tax deductibility.
Right.
I've worked with a lot of people that they're like, can I get my tax deductible receipt? Well, then I start to probe a little bit more. I say, are you itemizing your deductions? They're like, well, I don't know. I'll talk to my accountant. Well, talk to their accountant. No, I'm not itemizing my deductions. Well, then you don't need the tax receipt.
Right, it's 28K for couples. So, and especially if you're doing it over a 5-year period, you know, you can really knock it down and be under 25K.
So the common perception is that I need the tax deduction, when in all reality, most people don't really need it. And so that's where setting a threshold can be helpful to say, so if you're above this level, we can talk about tax deductibility. Otherwise, encourage you to make the gift to the House Corporation.
But Phil was ready to, you know, he was looking for the 501c3, but when he couldn't get it, he's like, okay, I'll buy the house. He tried to get him to gift it to it, and the state can't. They have to sell property at appraised value. So, you know, it came in appraised at 575. That's what he's going to buy it for. He's not going to get a tax deduction. But Aaron, I was supposed to meet him at the house back last fall at homecoming, and you know, I texted him the night before saying, you know, be careful. He lives in upstate New York. Be careful driving across because you know there's no good roads going across. And he texted me back in the morning with a picture of fog. He goes, there's a little ground fog, but we'll be taking off shortly. And I'm like, and it took me a while. It's like, he's got a fucking jet.
Yeah, he's just flying around.
He's got a fucking jet. So if this is a rounding error for him, this is not a personal or a financial decision. It's an emotional decision. And we've got a litigator, another pledge brother of mine, Paul Sanford, who you know pushes. It's an emotional decision. It's not financial. I mean, we did a thank you letter to him and got 110 alumni signatures. The intention was to put a tear in his eye and a pen in his hand. And I mean, that's still where we're going. I mean, what's preventing him from doing exactly what he wants is his attorney. And that's her job, is to protect him from outside business threats as well as from himself. And so anyway, that's independent of the rest of the folks, but he's not getting any benefit.
Fraternal Law Partners is who we go to for all of our legal
in Cincinnati. Yeah.
I mean, we can help advise, but they're the true experts. You know, we're fundraisers, not attorneys. Right. I do always boast on the Sigma Chi Foundation. You know, they've got a process. Certainly, they're going to charge a fee, but I think the fee is fairly small. And the thing I always encourage people to think about is, once a donor makes a gift, the first thing he wants is the receipt of the gift. And that's something that's hard for a volunteer team to do. And as you organize if you do organize your own 501c3, somebody's got to send pledge payment reminders, acknowledgements, receipts.
We'd have to have a whole administrator. You know, you'd need a bookkeeper or an administrator.
And that's where I guess I'm going, is sometimes groups get blinded by that cost, but you're going to incur a cost at some point anyway.
Right.
And so don't get sticker shock on the front end and then on the back end realize, holy smokes, we had a well-established foundation that's going to accept the money and then steward the money. Stewardship's another great thing is
Yeah.
we'll talk about how Sigma Chi is involved in the programmatic side. And so that's my
Gentlemen,
own personal opinion.
I hate to interrupt, but I gotta get a little business done here. I got a couple of things coming right up. So, but hey, Aaron, very, very nice to meet you and to talk to you. This
Likewise,
is
Tim.
all great stuff. Appreciate it. Tom,
Yep.
as usual, we'll talk
See
to
you
you
later,
soon.
Timmy.
All right, my friend. Bye-bye.
Aaron, just going back to this donor that we're talking about, Pat Marino. He says he can raise 100K. My concern is he's a loose cannon. Is he asked? I mean, he's right in the demographic where a bunch of the whales are, a bunch. And we don't want him to under donate, and he's going to be the asker to a lot of these folks. I'm just wondering if we wouldn't be wise to buy some consulting time, yourself or one of your consultants, to work with Danny Thayer and this guy Pat, just on what would you guys recommend our approach. Like I say, Danny's ready to, he's ready to rock and roll. He just sold a business a year and a half ago. He built a fucking incredible HVAC business. His father owned a HVAC company when we were younger. Actually, our pledge program, our pledge project was a beer cooler in the basement where we had a bar. He got the HVAC stuff. We built a box, put insulation. The Bud distributor in Bangor happened to be a Sigma Chi, so he gave us the tapper system. But anyway, he bought his father's business. I didn't consider him to be one of the best people. He's a great engineer, but he's an engineer, but he built this fucking business that was tremendous. And he also got into cannabis growing systems. Same stuff, temperature, moisture, mold, all the stuff that they already do. And I visited him at his factory one day, and he's like, "Hey, you want to go see the grow areas?" Because he had 3 grow areas on the back, and 2 of his sons were growers. And one of his sons is a Sigma Chi. Actually, I think I know more about his son than Danny does. But he's a doer, and he sold his business, so he sold his child. And anyway, fortunately, we've caught him at a slack time, so he's jumped in, doing this whole budget. We're doing a 5-year detailed budget process, forecast, but he's not a fundraiser, and Pat's not a fundraiser.
So that's the beauty in our work, right? We work with volunteers who aren't fundraisers. I've worked with campaign chairmen that say, "I'll never ask for a dime, Aaron." And by the 3rd time we sit down with a brother, I always tell a volunteer, it's fine. It's intimidating to make the ask. You don't want to make a financial ask to your brother. What I need you to do is talk about the value of Sigma Chi and what you how you benefited from that experience.
Yeah.
And so they tell the story. It's like by the time we get through the story, they're anticipating the ask, because they're like, "How do I get involved?"
Yes.
And so the ask is just a part of the process. And so this one I worked with, it was about the 3rd or 4th meeting, and we're walking into a restaurant, and he elbows me. He's like, "Hey, can I make the ask this time?" I was like, "Great."
Yeah, like anything else, once you
never
get
wanted to ask for it,
it's easy to do.
But and that's where I would challenge Pat. Hey Pat, before you go out there and start asking, I want to see the list of your individuals. We need to be strategic with each of those about how much.
Yeah.
But the $50,000, he's ready to commit to 50,000. I've seen guys like be really successful because that's all they do is they go out to their pledge brothers who know that they have the equal or similar capability and say, "Hey Tom, I made a $50,000 gift. I'd ask you to do the same."
Well, that's what he's doing. That actually the guy who was the Bud distributor in Bangor is Bob Flynn. He's also one of the guys that gave the first $1,000 seed donations. And Pat's like, I'm going to give 50, and I'm going to get Bob to give 50. Although it changed from the first time I talked to him at 50 to 25. 5 over 5 years. So I didn't quite understand that, but
But he told you that, and I hold people to that. You know, the first time we talked, you talked about a $50,000 commitment.
Yeah.
Would you consider making that? You know,
Yeah.
the worst he's going to do is come off to 25.
Yeah, I mean, and I've heard this, well, Andy Sawyer, who's not on here, he's our house court treasurer, just retired. He's a banker guy. He managed the state of Maine educational union pension fund. Sharp guy. You know, and we're talking about raising some seed money to get the legal funds done. And he's like, well, you know, I looked at it and I thought I can give 2,000, but you know, why should I do that when nobody, you know, he wants some equity in there. I could give two, but
That's exactly why you need the quiet phase fundraising,
yeah,
because you got to show other names are doing that to motivate people to step up in the same way.
right.
That example right there is exactly why you need to do that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, people are going to go conservative. They're going to write you a $1,000 check,
right.
and raising money $1,000 at a time is a slog.
Yeah, and that's what we got to be careful is we don't queer the bigger donor with a small donation. And he gave $1,000 to seed money for you know legal setup of the house court. Oh, I did my part. Like no, so we're being very careful in you know requesting seed money. But what do you think about you know some kind of a consulting call with Danny and Pat, either yourself or you know somebody that's involved? He's probably our biggest bundler, I would say. He's going to bundle to his immediate guys, but he also is close to. There's 2 or 3 whales in that group. Probably our number 1 whale is in that group, or kind of on the fringe. But I don't know. I'm just thinking, how do we get Pat's head in the right place?
I mean, I'd be happy to do a call. My worry is, you know, I think I was excited to do this call because if we're going to go at it alone, I want to offer you some sound advice to be successful. I mean,
and we appreciate
that.
We know you're in.
Want to see it. Yeah,
it is a business.
And knowing that, I think the alumni communication is a need. I think you could run that concurrently with the quiet phase fundraising. You know, we talk about the chapter. We drop, you know, the work that you're doing from an advisory standpoint in there. It builds the case for need, so that you could get 1 or 2 newsletters out fall and then spring, and then you drop a campaign announcement and they've already heard the chapter is great and it's easier to invest in something that's great. And so you kind of start to condition them for a future ask. So I think the communication effort is needed. And that's, you know, one thing that we can revisit about both here and at URI. If we're getting into more consulting calls, I would want to think more long-term. Is this 1 call or is there a need on an ongoing basis for a period of months? And what's the scope of work look like for that? So that our team can price it and look at our consultant availability to determine can we provide that consulting? Because
I mean, realistically, our need's not going to go away. I mean, if a one-time shot, it might help us with Pat, but it's going to come up again and again.
Well, and that would be my encouragement for the group to wrestle with. Right. What I don't like to do is try and come in on a recovery effort, because we have to try and undo work that's not aligned with our science and process. And so it's like, I'm a big fan of do it right the first time rather than try and correct yourself the second time.
Takes you twice as long if you can undo it.
Yeah. So those would be the 2 questions that I would wrestle with is, do we feel we can do this on our own, or should there be some consulting work? And then 2, what's the scope of work look like for that? What are our needs in managing these volunteers, making these solicitations, and the runway for that?
Okay.
You know, is it 6 months? We need volunteer coordination, a monthly meeting, some volunteer accountability to sit down with Pat to go over a prospect list. That's the type of work that we do in the campaign.
Yeah.
I just think without feasibility study, we can't price a campaign because we didn't do the research homework to determine.
It's the foundation for everything.
And that's where I think, you know, those groups that engage with the feasibility study with us, we do all that research and homework, and we deliver a campaign recommended goal.
Yeah, no,
You know, there's a
I'm
lot of
familiar
groups
with your process.
that test the million, come back to 500 to 750,000. We're very confident in the 500. There's a little less confidence in a consulting agreement because we don't have the research and the homework.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, like I say, I'm involved with URI and have been for the last 8 years. And you know, when we started this process, I talked to them about the capital campaign that they did, and then they utilized Pennington. And I guess their concern or their bitch was, you guys did the feasibility study and came back and said $1 million is doable. And then the actual campaign came back and I wasn't involved in this. It was before I got there. Came back at like 750. And obviously there's a dissatisfaction among that group.
Well, I'm gonna be transparent with you, Tom. That recommendation was 750 to $1 million. We probably started the campaign at $1 million. So same situation here that I'm coaching you on in yours. A campaign raised over 800,000, and so we were within the recommendation window. I think that's the challenge that we get into with providing that range recommendation. That upper end recommendation is the stretch goal if donors make the stretch commitments. If we don't get those,
and if the alumni do their part,
right? And so that's kind of the same thing I'm saying here is, you know, if 575 is the need, I would go after 575. However, if you land at 350, I don't think you should be disappointed that you didn't get to 575. It's like you have to ask relative to the need. And so I'm sorry to hear that there's some disappointment, but
it's gone. I mean, they don't even think about it. I think about it because I'm looking at a capital campaign. And anyway, all I can say about URI is we need your alumni communication and coordination. It's not happening. You know, we do a newsletter so infrequently, and I don't even know that our contact list has been updated since you know, the capital campaign, you know, 8 years ago.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of chapters that go through the capital campaign and they're like, well, we got what we needed, and then they say we'll do the alumni communication work and follow up with them 5 years, if that, later, and they're like, well, we haven't sent something out in quite a while. And it's like, well,
and that's what happens. It's standard. You can't, and our goal is to make the fundraising ongoing. You know, I talked with some other guys too about, you know, setting up automatic withdrawals, and it's like, it's great. My wife never sees it. I give them, you know, $300 a month, and it just comes out. But it's a nice steady feed. But you know, once you re-engage the people emotionally, you can re-engage them financially. But the communication is everything.
Well, and I'll put the exclamation point behind that, because you're talking to a guy who our chapter went through a feasibility study in 2006 and it failed because alumni said, I'm not connected enough to the chapter.
Yeah.
So
why do you only call me when you're looking for money? You only call me when you're looking for money. And that's my fear right now, you know, with Danny Thayer is, you know, we're going out there, but we haven't, you know, prepared the field.
Well, and that's, again, I've said this maybe 3 times on this call. That's the beauty of the quiet phase fundraising effort.
Yeah.
You're only talking to a select population. And so you don't get, you know, if you publicly announce this thing and put it on social media and then you fail, like, that's a huge foot in the mouth.
Yeah.
If you talk to 25 people and you know that you're not going to meet 500,000, you can adjust the goal, and it's easy to go back to those 25 people, and they're probably more understanding because they've been in like conversations with businesses. Start a business or do a seed funding round or whatnot. They're more understanding of that process.
Yeah.
When you go back to them, you can say, you know, we've got to pull back on our goal because our donors that we talked with didn't make the stretch commitments, and so it's kind of a last ditch opportunity to see if they up their support.
All right. I see lots of future dancing that we can do.
Yeah, where do we go from here? Do you want to talk with your? So my mind is 3 places. Number 1 is evaluating what the needs are from a consulting period for this capital campaign. And then 2 are communication for both Maine and Rhode Island. Do you want to see proposals for the communication agreement?
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
The only thing I need for that, Tom, is the living mailable alumni.
I don't know how to validate that. I mean, we've got the best contact
Just
with,
kind of a bump,
so like 700
active.
700
Yeah,
active
great.
contacts at Maine.
I just need to respond to one text real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, I think just the ballpark, because we try and price it based upon mailable alumni, and so your active alumni, just even a ballpark, it doesn't have to be accurate.
Yeah.
Perfectly accurate. If engaged, then we would probably pull it from the most trusted source, whether that's held locally or the national fraternity.
Yeah.
But at least kind of ballparking that helps us determine what the cost, both from a services and printing and postage. We bill that service to coordinate the program, and then we pass along printing and postage, and so you can see exactly what the printing and postage looks like.
Yeah.
There's some companies that bundle it and they just make a whole bunch of money on printing and postage. We just like to pass that along. And then after you talk with your team, we can revisit campaign and what campaign needs are.
All right. And I keep coming back to Pat Marino. They're meeting with this group tonight. I don't know how well attended it's going to be. I mean, he's got about 70 people on his regular list. But it's the Thursday before the holiday. I don't know how many people are really going to be there. But again, what would it cost us to have you have a phone call with him and Danny Thayer? I mean, you don't have to tell me off the top of your head, but I'm just afraid of messing up. He's dancing where a lot of our whales are.
So I don't know that a phone call would happen before tonight.
Oh no, it's not going to happen tonight. I just, before he starts going out to other folks next week.
And that, I think, goes back to that other question: is this the only need, or is there a larger need? Because I
think there's a larger need, but this is a short-term need. I just want to make sure we don't screw up going after some of our whales.
Yeah. My recommendation on working with Pat is twofold. One, tell Pat we need to solicit these men individually, not as a group, because the wealth of that group, if he says it's all the same, great. But the willingness might not all be the same, and so you need to approach them individually.
He agrees with that.
Okay. And then we just need to see the list so that we can agree to what the right ask is for each of those individuals. And then you just send them down the list. I think that could be pretty well managed. Because what I wouldn't want him to do is get together in a group and say, I'm in for 50. Would you guys do that? And there's a guy sitting there capable of 100. Or, he doesn't make a strategic ask and says, we're going to do this capital campaign. I need you all involved. And some guy shoots his hands up and goes, I'll give you $1,000. And everybody there says, I'll give you $1,000. Well, if they're all capable of 50, we just lost a whole bunch of change.
Well, he had lunch with Danny Monday, and he said, I'll between my crew, I'll raise 100K.
Yep. And I would just ask him, like, where does that 100K come from? Which goes to the strategic ask of each individual.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I hear that sometimes, and as we start to walk through, he's like, "Oh, he's capable of 50. He's capable of 50." I'm like, "Well, there's your 100 grand. Why don't we set the goal at 250?"
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So I think talk with the team, feel out what those needs are, and then we can revisit that conversation. But I'll work on those proposals. If you can send me the alumni numbers for both chapters, I'll get a proposal put together of that communication need.
All right, that sounds cool, Aaron.
Great. Hey, this is a pleasure of mine, so I appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you giving us your time. This is professional time, and I know you guys are in business, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Glad to help. Just let us know how we can be helpful.
well, like I say, I'm pretty confident we need alumni services in both places. Everything we do is built on that foundation.
Yep.
But okay, my friend.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Okay. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tom.